Alrighty then, everybody, welcome to the Alex Questas Show. Happy to have everybody here on this Wednesday, July 13th of 2022. Before we get into anything fun, like, share, follow, subscribe, rate 5 stars on Spotify and iTunes. Spread this word of mouth. Follow us on all the socials. Just go search the Alex Questas Show. You'll find us there. First and foremost, I'm going to introduce. Do I want to introduce you, Dave? You're here. You're here again.
I mean,
Hi,
you
Dave.
don't have to. I'm always here. But.
Yeah, you're just like that fly on the wall that I squashed and just never cleaned up. You're just that guy.
Yeah, it's true. But as you noticed, I've progressively gotten much more and more excited than I have been for our show today.
This is the most excited I've seen you for a show. Normally, like, you're just all like mundane and it's like, I picked the topic. My brother's an idiot. Just don't let him talk. But today you're actually like, you're in, and I'm excited because we do have a great show today. Our guest is someone that, if you like the movie Manos, Hands of Fate, for whatever reason you like it, you're going to know who this is. It's Jackey Neyman Jones. She was Debbie from the cult classic, the 1966 horror film, Manos, Hands of Fate. Jackey, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I'm a little flattered to know that David's so excited. That's cool.
Yeah. It's so we're not going to lie. We started off, neither Dave or I knew nothing about Manos. We did not know anything. And I watched the trailer, read a whole bunch about it, and I'm thoroughly going to go back. And I started watching it. My daughters were going crazy. So I got through about 20 minutes, a half an hour of it. And I'm going to go back and watch the rest of it because everything I've read, seen, I need to finish this movie because it looks like lots of fun. So you, if I'm not mistaken, you were 7 years old when this movie was made and your father, Tom, was the lead role. So first off, I have never talked to somebody who was a child actor, actress. What was it like being a 7-year-old on the set? Was it comforting with your parents there? Was there a little more pressure? How was that?
Well, I was 6 I turned 7 that summer.
Okay.
And, it's just a real independent, curious kid. My dad was executive director of the South El Paso Boys Club. My mother was a teacher. And my dad was an artist. He worked in all kinds of mediums, and he was also very heavily into community theater. And El Paso had a very strong culture, artistic culture, theater and art and such. And so I kind of grew up with my dad in the theater, and I spent every chance I got there. I mean, that's how I learned to read, was I ran lines for him. I just adored my dad. And so anywhere he was, I wanted to be. And so when he was asked to play the lead of Manos, Hal Warren, who created the film, wrote, produced, directed it, he picked my dad because my dad had played a lot of lead roles. So he picked him, but he also picked him because he knew my dad was an artist and he knew he had a child and a dog. And so it was convenient, so they needed a kid, and I was that kid. And our family Doberman became the master's demon dog. But, when you watch the film, you can clearly see that the dog is, although he's a Doberman, he's a real sweetheart. He's like wiggling and such. But when my dad first asked me, I said, well, he says, I'm going to be in a movie and we need a little girl. Would you like to play that role? And I was like, I don't know. I was kind of shy. And he's just said, that's okay, honey. If you don't want to do it, we can just find another little girl. No. So that's pretty much how I got into it. And then it was such a small cast and crew, and it was filmed out in the desert outside of El Paso, nights and weekends, because everybody else they all had day jobs. And so if I had to be in any scenes at all, then I was there for the whole shoot because my dad was my ride. which was just fine with me. I was you can imagine a 6-year-old in the desert at night. Yeah, I had a good time.
Yeah.
So, it's weird because this came to prominence 27 years after it was released. It was released in 1966, and it really didn't get, much fanfare. 27 years later, Mystery Science Theater 3000 airs it in 1993. It's becomes its biggest episode in the history of the show. And all of a sudden, the cult classic following occurs. And now, especially in the horror film genre, people know what Manos Hands of Fate is. And a lot of people love Mystery Science Theater 3000. They all know what this is. So it blew up. At that point, you're now, a middle-aged woman. And what was that like for you? Kind of, okay, I was in this film. I was young. I always liked the arts. Yeah, it was, obviously a memory. That's my first movie I was in. And then so many years later, what was it like? Kind of like, oh, okay, this is huge. Like, what was your reaction at that time?
Yeah, well, the Manos was filmed and created so quickly, and a lot of things happened. Hal was kind of a dictator, he just got things done. And so, it was filmed in the summer, and then on November 15th, 1966, there's this big premiere in El Paso, and this is 1966. So all the women show up in gowns and opera gloves. The men have tuxedos. Hal Warren managed to find the lights that, scan the sky. Well, he had a friend who owned the local car dealership, and he found a red carpet somewhere, and he rented one limo, and he had the whole cast and crew drive to the theater and park a block away and wait in the alleyway behind the theater. And this limo would circle around, bring the cast. He really made it a big production. And so we're all in the theater, and we're sitting there, and it begins. And that's when everybody that was part of it started to realize what they'd gotten themselves into. And the audience was riffing it the first time it was shown. And so when it was over, everybody just kind of escaped the theater, and it was a tight, like I said, El Paso was a tight-knit cultural group. So everyone very blessedly let the cast and crew live it down. Nobody talked about it. I think MST once said it was like, or in one of the articles, it was like we pulled off a heist and we just scattered and nobody ever talked about it again. But for me, it was really the best summer of my life. Spending that time with my dad. So I grew up holding on to those memories, reliving them tight. There was a lot of dark times in my family, and those were the light for me. And then when I got out of high school, and this is still pre-internet, I started looking for it. I've been telling friends stories about it all my life. And so I started looking for it, and I couldn't find it. Nobody had heard of it. I found out later it showed in a few West Texas drive-ins, like at, drive-in theaters. It was like the third movie on a horror night to get people to go home. And so I gave up. And then I got married and I had a son. And in 1993, my dad was living on the coast in Lincoln City, Oregon. And he was a Mystery Science Theater fan. And so he's watching it and kind of dozing off. And then he hears this familiar music and he sees himself on the screen. And then he called me after it was over and said, "You'll just never believe what I just saw." And I was shocked. It was on Comedy Central. Yeah. And they had an 800 number in the corner of the screen. And, we had Comedy Central. So I knew, there was no such thing as reruns or YouTube or anything like that. So, it was a one-shot deal and I'd missed it. So I called the 800 number. This is, I don't know, it's like a Saturday or a Sunday. It was in January. And an actual human answered the phone.
Oh, wow. Those exist
yeah,
on those numbers.
rare.
It's not a robot anymore. Press
Yeah,
this
that was
number.
crazy. A real person answered the phone, and I had rehearsed what I was going to say, and I told him they had just shown this movie that my whole family was part of, and that I'd been looking for it my whole life. And was there any way I could get a copy? And this is VHS, you know?
Yeah.
And he
My
asked
younger
me-
brother there doesn't know anything about those. I grew up with
I know a
VHS.
little bit of
Yeah. Yeah. And so he asked the name of it. I told him, and I mean, I was shaking. I couldn't believe I was this close to this, and I didn't know what, you know, I didn't have any experience in doing something like this. And he said, I told him the name, and then there's this long pause, and I didn't know if we got disconnected and I was going to have to find the courage to call again, or if he'd hung up on me. And then he blurts out, he goes, "Oh my God, are you Debbie?" I mean, that's the first thing I heard. And I mean, I was shocked. And then I said, "Is there any way I can get a copy?" And he says, "That is our favorite bad movie here in the HBO offices." And I just had a copy of it on my desk last week. So yes. And so he went and he ran off a bootleg VHS copy and sent it to me. And I took it in my bedroom and I watched it, and I was happy, you know, I was satisfied. That's it. That's great. I got what I'd been looking for my whole life. And then it just took off, and it won the Turkey Day Awards once, and then it won again, and then it was the worst movie ever made. And it just kept plateauing. And every time I just enjoyed it, everything that happened, and then it plateaued. And I'd go, "That was great. That was really fun." And then it'd do something else, and it's just weird. I mean, I've been working it, that's for sure, because I just love it so much. Mystery Science Theater people, that's my tribe. You know, I grew up with Fire Sign Theater, and my best friend and I memorized all the albums and drove everybody nuts at school. So I really get the MST crowd, and I don't know how any of this happened. It's all like magic, but I'm right where I want to be, you know.
So I want to ask you two things. One, that I read that this movie was made on a bet. And then secondly, the reason why it came out and had so many issues that it had was that two people had told Hal that, "Hey, don't worry about it. Let's wrap this up. We'll take it to post-production. It'll get all cleaned up and it's good." And they weren't getting paid, and they just wanted to be done. And then they just went and submitted it and just ran it. And that's why it has so many, technical issues. And I think why it has the worst movie ever made moniker. How old were you? Where were you when you found out any of this? And is that true? Those two things, are they true? Number one, and how old were you when you found out, and what did you feel when you kind of discovered all this?
Well, I mean, during the film, Hal was kind of a dictator, and he was in charge of everything. You know, he had a very tiny budget. It was like $19,000. And these were all people that he worked with in the theater, that he got involved in it. And, theater people are willing to pretty much cut off their head to make it work, without anything. But he promised everybody a share of the profits, which there were none. And he promised a lot of things that, the only people that got paid was me. I got a red bicycle with training wheels, and my dog Shanka got a 50-pound bag of dog food. And that was
awesome.
Pretty much it. And so anyway, what was the first question?
So it was apparently, I read that this movie was made on a bet. Hal made this on a bet. Is that true?
Yeah.
And when did you find out about that?
Because Hal was actually, he had lived in New York. He had been a stand-up comedian. I mean, that was his love, was comedy. And his whole idea was, that he wasn't thinking he was making a good movie, but his goal was to bring the film industry to the Southwest, and then he'd be the guy known for doing that.
Okay.
So he was on a episode of Route 66 that was directed, produced by Sterling Silliphant. And Hal, being the salesman that he is, he was in a coffee shop with Sterling Silliphant, and he made a bet. He said, they were having a conversation. He said, well, anybody can make a movie. I can make a movie, and he already had an idea for one. He'd actually already kind of written a script. So he had the outline. And so he bet Sterling Silliphant that he could make a movie, and he did. He made a movie.
He made a movie.
Good for him for following through. That's awesome. Doesn't matter if it's good or not. He did it.
I know. And I think, honestly, that's one of the things that really endears it to the fans is it's relatable in that way because, people say things like that all the time, but who actually gets it done?
Yeah.
No matter what. Yeah. And then what was the second question?
The second one was essentially that it was, Hal was under the impression that it was going to get cleaned up in post-production.
Oh,
and it was essentially sabotaged in a way to become where it is.
He wasn't sabotaged. He made all the decisions, and he didn't really let anybody in on if there was any sabotage at all. It would have been his two crew members, Bernie and Bob. Bob was a cameraman and Bernie was the assistant, but and they were best friends and they were jokers, they were like poker buddies. And so when they started getting frustrated with Hal, they started pranking him a little bit and just trying to see how close he was paying attention. So like, if you really watch the film, you'll see a beer bottle behind my dad at one point, that wasn't supposed to be there. And then, which probably wasn't intended, is when my dad's holding up Torgo's hand on fire, you'll see the can of lighter fluid behind him. There's just little things like that. And, but Hal had total autonomy on this film. And so it was shot on a Filmo 70, a Korean war camera that shoots only like 32 seconds at a time. It's a 32-second burst.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was a rented camera. He had to buy the film, and film was expensive. And in order to shoot a feature-length film, he couldn't really edit much. He couldn't cut much. There's very little edited out of that film. And I know that for sure because the original work print was actually found and restored. But in the meantime, Hal put this thing together. It was shot silent. The camera didn't shoot, so he had to dub it. And some of the actors, like me, did not know that. So all the women, all 8 women and the 6-year-old child were dubbed by one woman, middle-aged woman. And only a few of the male actors actually got to do their own voices. But somewhere in there, Hal missed getting a proper copyright on the film, So that's one of the miracles about it. If he had got a copyright on that film, Mystery Science Theater would not have touched it because they only do public domain.
Okay, yeah.
It's just like they said, it's like magic. It's just weird.
Yeah.
It's like it has a life of its own. It decides what it's going to do. I don't get it, but I'm definitely along for the ride.
Yeah. So 1993 comes along, Mystery Science Theater plays it. It gets a following. At this point, are you getting called now to go to like conventions and stuff and appear as Debbie from Manos? Are you doing conventions currently? Like, is that something that became part of your life after this became big?
Well, it's kind of a series of things. It's like my dad he was suicidal when I was growing up. And then he married someone who didn't approve of me. I wasn't approved of by the master's wife. And so for some reason, I don't know what it is, but when Manos came out and I started responding to things and I realized that for some reason or another, if it was Manos related, she was let us get together. And so I started looking for opportunities, and my dad was game because he had a good sense of humor. I mean, we both said it's not our fault. It's a bad movie. It's not our movie,
You did what we were told.
Yeah, exactly. And so, so it just kept building, and it's just so strange because, again, with Mystery Science Theater, they're just the greatest group of people ever. I mean, they're just intelligent, and they're nerdy, and they're creative, and they think outside the box, and things just started happening. I got invited to a few conventions. I started going to conventions, and then I decided I needed to write a book while the memories were still in my mind, and while there were still a few people living who had been part of the original. And it just kind of took off from there. When the book came out, and I did a book tour, and the restoration came out. And so, I went to Chicago and went to the premiere of the restored version of Manos at the Chicago Music Box, and did some book signings at the same time. And so, all this stuff just kind of built on itself and continued to build. And, Manos, The Hands of Felt, there's puppet theater in Seattle, Washington.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And I live near Portland. So I found out about that. I connected with Rachel Jackson, who's the puppeteer, and she's this amazing woman. And then there's this local guy, Joe Sherlock, who does, I call him boobies and blood movies. And he started getting me into his movies. And I said, I'll be in your movies, but I'm not taking anything off. So I've been in 7 of his movies now, and he kills me gruesomely every time I tease him. That's how you're getting back at me. And then through them, I met Tanya Atomic, and the 4 of us decided to do a sequel, while my dad was still living. Mm-hmm. And because I wrote the book, I found people. So I found Diane Marie, who had played my mother in the original, Maggie, and she was living in Colorado. So we got her out here. I mean, we brought her into the script. And then the guy who played the sheriff, William Bryan Jennings, he'd passed on, but we found his son, who was in community theater, and he not only invested in the film, but he came in and he played our sheriff, the son of the original sheriff. That's awesome. It was just incredible. And all these things keep building and building and building, and new things come up. And I'm an artist. I'm doing 7 projects same time all the time. And so if somebody's doing a project and asks me to be involved, I'm like, yeah, sure. I just wrote the foreword or the intro to a new Manos novel that's available now. And it's a whole different story. But yeah, so there's the puppet theater. There's 3 stage productions. I got to be part of one of them in Portland. I found out about it and contacted them and asked if I could come. And they got so excited, they asked if I wanted to be part of it. Wow. So it was a comedy. It's so funny. God, I wish I could get it on video. It's hilarious. So they had Debbie as a doll, like a puppet on stage that somebody carried. And the Doberman was made out of felt and cardboard and had little wheels and rolled across the stage. He'd fall over every now and again. And So they invited me and put me up in Portland at a B&B for the run of the show. And I got poetic justice. I got to play my own voice.
Yeah, awesome. There you go.
From the sound booth.
That's awesome.
So I got to, the puppet was on stage and I got to run the lines for her. So, just all these amazing things. There's trading cards. There's a couple of video games. There's a Nintendo style video game. There's books. There's other films. God, I don't know. There's just so many things. And now, the Manos Chronicles, and I'm working on a documentary now.
So I want to get into all that. First off, I do want to plug the book. It's named Growing Up Manos, The Hands of Fate, How I Was the Child Star of the Worst Movie Ever Made, and Live to Tell the Story. You can find it on Amazon. You could buy it hardcover for $25, paperback $15. It's on the Kindle for $10. It's 4.5 stars, so it's a much better review than the movie. But so you can find that there if you're interested. And so it just sounds like since Mystery Science Theater, everything is kind of taken off. Like seem like you have an enjoyable life, like you're having fun. I have to ask, what were you doing for work before any of this started to blow up?
Well, I've worked all my life. I mean, I don't make any money at this Manos stuff, believe me. It's for the love of Manos. Mm-hmm. And, maybe someday, but we'll see. So I've been an artist my whole life. I started when in 1993, I was on probably one of my first businesses. I was doing hand-painted T-shirts for winery tasting rooms. I had a very good business going with hand-painted T-shirts, and then I went into faux finish, and I had a 30-year career doing high-end faux finish. I mean, I've done murals, plaster treatments, wall treatments, marbling. I mean, it's like that. It was such a great way to make a living. I made a good living, but I got to be really creative because people would show me a picture from a magazine, or they'd tell me an idea, and I'd go home and make a sample board. I go, you mean this? That was an amazing career. In fact, I told my kids I had retired, and then a couple months ago, I got this incredible job doing a 2-color faux finish in $1 million garage. And I mean, literally $1 million garage.
Wow.
And I was on a 25-foot scissor lift for a week. And my kids were going, you promised you weren't going to. I'm like, sorry. But I'm cured. No, I can't. That was exhausting. But so, 30-year career doing high-end faux finish. And then now, for the last 7 years, I've been doing the paint and sip parties, at bars and restaurants.
Yep.
Then COVID hit. And now I'm working with, Mystery Science Theater's Frank and Trace, the Mads. They were doing touring shows. And through COVID, they've been doing online shows, riffing movies. And last December, they decided to do Manos, the Hands of Fate for their holiday show, their December show. And they invited me to be a special guest, and they got like 3,000 people. They said it was their best attended show of the year. Wow. And I had been thinking for quite a while about doing online classes. And I'd been thinking about doing Mystery Science Theater related classes.
That'd be cool.
And so after that, I talked to their producer and said, hey, he also produces the Mary Jo Peele show. She was Dr. Forrester's mom. And so he said yes. And we're on I think this month is our 4th class, but we're doing it on a subscription. a yearly subscription, or you can just try it out for 1 month, but it's growing, and that's incredible. It's really extending my own art, because I'm working in, I'm working in things that I'm outside my comfort zone of what I usually do. So like, we were doing the robots, Tom Servo, and then let's see, and then movies, Godzilla. Last month we did Mothra. I got a camera.
You're talking to a huge Godzilla fan. My father showed us every single old Godzilla movie. I watched the original terrible dubs. So it's like, I am all about Godzilla. I've seen every single one. David's seen them all. We used to have the VHS and just sit there and beg my dad to put it on again. He'd be like, I don't want to watch Mecha Godzilla again.
Yeah, I watched a lot of Godzilla too. It's like the midnight movie, when we're like 19 years old. And
Sci-Fi had it every Saturday for a long time. They had Godzilla mornings. That's how much, believe me, you're talking to two nerds here. We are of the same kin. So you spoke about your artwork, David. Do you want to tell Jackey why you were so happy at the beginning of the show?
Well, I was very happy.
Here. Oh, by the way, I know your audience can't see this, but this is one of our upcoming paintings.
That looks really good. That's awesome. So funny enough, I was looking at a lot of things Manos related, and I was on your Etsy, and I was looking at, first off, the robe looks incredible.
I've sold 42.
Yeah, I can see why. But also, I ended up actually getting Zappa and Poodle as the master and dog, because I love it. It looks awesome.
Did you? Yeah, Are you the order that I saw pop up?
That just happened? Yes. That's me.
We're on here.
I just sent one off. Yeah, well, I'm a huge Zappa fan. And what happened was I had a mega fan who had already ordered the robe, and he bought a Torgo staff from me. And then he says, hey, can you, do a custom painting for me of Frank Zappa as the master with his poodle? I'm like, yeah. Cool. But it was so cool that I asked him if I could sell prints of it. And I'm really glad, because I was a huge Zappa fan. I just think that's awesome.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. Like I can't wait for it to come in, because I told Alex, like, it's going right back here. Like, might go back to video just so I could show that off, because it's just a really good, really.
Well, I'll get it right out to you then. I just shipped one today, so I know I have another one.
That's perfect.
Yeah, we'll put that up. Once David gets it, David will send me like a good picture of it where it is, and we can put that up.
Well, you make sure, I offer personalization. So besides writing my name on it, signing my name, I'll write whatever you want, for the most part.
No, that's awesome. That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, your name's fine. I saw it and I was like, yeah, I have to have that. That is something I have to have.
And we do have a buddy who's a performing artist, and we are considering going together and getting him the robe so he could perform with the robe on. Yeah. Because I think that would just be amazing if he's on stage wearing the robe, and it would be
yeah. As long as you send pictures,
we'll make him shout you out, and Manos. Like it would happen.
Well, I make them signed and numbered. My mother made the original robe. And I still have memories of my parents laying that fabric out on the living room floor and talking about it. And they designed it together, but she sewed it. She was a teacher, but she's a wonderful seamstress, and she taught me to sew. So every time I make one, I know I'm honoring both of my parents. I'm really proud of my sewing skills, and it's because of her. And I made 42 of them. I made one for a guy in England who was 6'8". I don't know about these overseas guys. I just shipped one last year to a guy in Australia who was 6'4", and I shipped one to a woman in Georgia who was 4'11". So they're definitely custom.
That's it.
It's sweet.
Amazing.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I didn't know anything about Manos before we were reached out to. So I've just been looking at a ton of stuff. I still haven't watched it. I'm definitely going to. But I mean, for me, like the aesthetic of the robe, I don't know. There's something about it that especially if it gets into like the right, somewhat mainstream hands, like I think people would, they won't know about the movie, but they'll love that robe. They'll love it. Like I enjoy the hell out of that.
Well, I'll tell you, the guy who's producing my online Mystery Science Theater classes, and he produces, like I said, the Mads, Mary Jo Peel, but he's got an online store where he sells T-shirts and such. And just like 3 days ago, we designed a Manos T-shirt, with the hands, but for women. And then he came up with the idea of it's a skater's dress, a girl's. So it's like a kind of fitted, flared skirt with the hands. Yeah. Anyway, mine should be here any day, and I'll model it and put it out there. But in the first day he put it out there, we sold 10 of them.
That's pretty.
There is a good following out there for it. So you mentioned you made a sequel. If I'm not mistaken, that was in 2018, if I saw correctly.
Yeah.
And there was also a prequel made, apparently. Was that also done?
Yeah, I don't talk about that much. And the guy, David Roy, this really nice guy, he created the prequel, The Rise of Torgo. And he asked if I would play a part in it. We filmed me remotely. I have a friend who does film, and we I made a robe for myself and set it up in my living room, or in his living room, my friend's. And I did. Anyway, it's not a good film, but who am I to complain,
I just love your attitude towards this stuff, because a lot of artists are very like emotional. Like they don't like this type of criticism. They don't like it when somebody says their film is bad, or they acted in the worst film ever made. Like, but you just have such a good air about you where you're just like, yeah, it's the worst film ever, and I'm proud of it. Like,
well, I was 6 years old. It wasn't my fault. And my dad had that attitude too. He just got a lot of fun out of it. Coincidentally, that same year that we did Manos, my dad was in the play Henry IV and played the king, King Henry.
Yeah. And
in fact, that's where Hal Warren found all the male actors and his crew, all of them. John Reynolds, who played Torgo. I have photographs of newspaper articles about promoting that play, but my dad won Best Actor of the Year award for that play. That's and awesome. Then 2 months later, he's doing Manos. So, and John Reynolds, who played Torgo, was actually, he was a very good actor. He did a number of things, and, he had his own personal problems, but he was one of those people, and my dad too, they were of that older style of acting, of just really becoming the character and kind of living it.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about your artwork, because I've scrolled through it. David scrolled through it a little bit, looked at it, and you're very talented. I have to say, I liked a lot of your artwork. I think it's good. Where do you get, obviously you do custom draws, but where does a lot of your inspiration come from for your artwork? Is it many different things? Is it kind of how you feel in that mode? Like, where does it come from for you to do the art that you do? Because you should be known as well for your art, because you are very good.
Yeah. And I just, last week I entered into a magazine that does juried shows 6 times a year, and they were doing a West Coast show, and I happened to get into it. So we'll see if I get in the magazine, but I'm looking at getting into galleries now that I have more time in my studio where I'm sitting now. I have this beautiful studio space, but I've been doing art all my life. But my dad always did, I don't know, he used things. Like I remember as a kid, we would go out in the desert. He'd take me with him, and he'd find he'd know where these old abandoned silver mines were. And we'd quarry, and we'd find turquoise, and then he'd make jewelry out of it.
Cool.
Or we'd take his old truck out and he'd find old abandoned shacks and he would dismantle them, take the wood home and panel our living room or make frames for his art. He made furniture. I have pictures of our living room where he made the couch. My mother made the cushions and the drapes. It's like, that was my family. We were always working on projects. Mm-hmm. And my dad did welding. And so I followed that. I hate to throw things away. And I like to turn them into something. And it just kind of started that way. I live in an old rural logging town in Western Oregon. And I bought a 100-year-old house to raise my boys in. And I see burn piles with an old door or a window frame, or I'd see things up against garages and I'd ask people, can I have that? And so I got quite a collection going years and years ago. And I realized I didn't really want to be a hoarder. So I started using them. And so the doors, like these are 100-year-old doors or 115-year-old doors. And with a skill saw, I cut the panels. So like each door has maybe 5 panels. Mm-hmm. And then on the center of that, using the skills and the talents from my faux finish career, I build up like a Venetian plaster center, and then I create my art on that. And what's really interesting, well, there's a few things that I find myself really drawn to. It's like octopus or jelly, sea life, and then trees and bats and crows. So I realized over time that I've got under the water, I've got something planted and solid in the earth, and then I have these. So symbolism was really important to me. Everything that I do has more than one meaning. But like one time I did a bunch of art for an art show, and then I had it all set up, and I realized that I had painted 3 out of 5 pieces from one door. And I didn't know where this door had come from, but I knew it was over 100 years old. And, it'd been out in the weather, so the edges were all crackled and everything, which at that time people are paying a lot of money to have you crackle their furniture. And here it is, so I'm enhancing the character of the piece to begin with. And then I just, like right now, I have all these things stacked up that are ready to be painted. And I just wait till something tells me what's going to go on that piece. And at this one show, these 3 pieces, I looked at them and they were women. All of them were women in various forms of kind of inner celebration or expression. And they all came from the same door. That was weird. I just can't help but wonder if a woman owned that house that door came from. I mean, I feel that really strongly. So, I've always been a very, intuition and that kind of person. So I just wait till it tells me.
I do envy people that have artistic ability and the artistic eye, because I have no talent whatsoever for virtually anything. But artistic people, you guys just you see things that a normie like me can never see. Like you're looking at doors and you're looking at the different things and how beautiful. And I'm just I put panels on it, I open and close it, I walk through it. It's just I do envy those that are autistic. So that's awesome. And like I said, your art is fantastic. And
thank you.
You have something coming up though that I'm excited for you to tell people about, because it's Manos related too. You talked about Manos Chronicles. There's a teaser trailer up. Where are people going to be able to find this? And what exactly is it? A TV show? Is it kind of a short run? What can people expect from Manos Chronicles?
Well, it's designed to be a series. And initially it was to be a web series. At this point, I'm not sure because I'm not on that side of it. But Willow Paulson, who's written it, produced it, directed it, she created the pilot episode, and I'd seen some of her other work, and we filmed that. But I mean, it's so close. They're done with the color correction, the editing, everything. It's virtually done. And in the meantime, she has been talking to distributors. She had said she's already got a distributor, but she was doing some more work to see if she could like bring it up a notch, to something else. Because her goal is to get a distributor that's going to finance us to do more episodes. And she's got more episodes planned out. So basically the story is if, Debbie and her mom were kept by the cult, the polygamous cult. And that's one of the things that really disturbed people in the original film, is the very last shot of 6-year-old little girl dressed as one of the wives,
in all white.
Yeah. My mother made those costumes, by the way. And I can't tell you how excited I was when she made me a little mini wives dress so I could look like the big girls.
I get to be a wife. Yeah.
And then if you go into the symbolism part, it gets even weirder because, the master's my dad in real life. So that's odd. Yeah. Ooh, dark. But anyway, so Manos so I was I produced Manos Returns and now the Manos Chronicles, and it's 2 different universes. And that's what I'm finding in the whole, I'm calling it now the Manos verse, because everybody that does a project creates their own universe. They take that skeletal storyline and they take it and create something new with it. And so Manos Returns is the film where if Debbie was kept by the Valley Lodge, if she was raised by this polygamist group, and 50 years later, she is now the master. She becomes the master, and she's got these bickering women around her that she really has no use for. And and she's raised by a very, odd family, so to speak. So I'm not a very pleasant human in Manos Returns. But then in the Manos Chronicles, it's a different universe. It's if Debbie had escaped the Valley Lodge and she spent her life in hiding because she doesn't want to be dragged back. So when she grows up, she decides that things like that aren't going to happen to anybody else. So she becomes kind of a demon ghost hunter, a person who stands up for people who can't stand up for themselves. And I really love that pilot. I cannot wait for people to see it. The trailer really demonstrates what's going to be. I love the trailer. And I mean, she sent me the almost finished, and I watched it with my family about a month ago, and they loved it. It was great to see it all cleaned up, and boy, at that point, all they needed was a couple tiny special effects. So anyhow, I expect it to be out very soon. I'm not sure, but what I do know is that the poster for it was designed by Eric Brescherds, if I'm saying his name correctly, but he designs posters for all kinds of films, like What We Do in the Shadows, Spider-Man. That's what he does. He's a poster designer for film. He happens to be a Manos stan, and his mom is friends with Willow, who's creating the Manos Chronicles. So he created that poster for us. It would have probably cost most of our budget if we had to pay somebody to do that.
Well, that sounds awesome. You definitely need to let David know when that comes out, because I certainly be checking it out. And you're now, whether you want to be or not, you're officially a friend of the show. So we will be promoting it and trying to get it out as much as possible as well. Because, even without fully watching the film, you have Manos fans here. We are now officially, Dave, I think it's safe to say we are Manos fans.
I mean,
as they say in the film, there is no way out.
I love it. All right. So, Jackey, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was lots of fun.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Once again, Jackey Neyman Jones, Debbie from the cult classic movie, 1966 film, Manos, Hands of Fate. Debbie, is there anything else you'd like to promote? I know you talked about your Facebook page. You want to direct people over there. How can people find your Facebook page? What should they go and search?
Yeah, Jackey Neyman Jones fan page. And then I'm working on a website right now, Jackey's Manos. And so pretty much I'm kind of putting everything under Jackey's Manos, my Etsy. And so that's a good way to find me.
All right. So everyone, I want to thank you all for listening. This was a fun interview, and I hope everybody checks out Manos Hands of Fate, finds the sequel, finds the prequel, reads the book, read Jackey's book about being Debbie, and then look out for Manos Chronicles coming out. So everybody, really appreciate you all listening. Have a good one.
High tides, bike rides, do a little dance in the street lights, laying in the sand till the sunrise. High fives, I know we're gonna be alright. High tides, bike rides, do a little dance in the street lights, laying in the sand till the sunrise. High fives, I know we're gonna be alright. Let's see a sunset, my brother's got a homestead, life on the beach, it ain't time to give it.